What's up, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Variant the Podcast. I am one of your hosts, Arris Quinones, with Tim Conley.
What is going on, Variant Nation?
What is up? Well, what's going on is a lot. Well, first of all, this week, I know we can't talk about it yet because the things haven't dropped, but we got Godzilla versus Kong coming out. We got a new episode of Falcon Winter Soldier coming out, and the premiere of the Invincible series on Amazon Prime Video. There's a lot of things happening this week. A lot of good geekdom things.
There is a lot, yeah. There's, that we're in that time window we've been talking about where it's just every week is a lot of things.
Mm-hmm. Yes, which is glorious. And then I'm still trying to make my way through a second viewing of the Snyder Cut. I've watched the halfway through, so I stopped at the 2-hour mark. So I got another movie left, I guess you could say. But Falcon Winter Soldier, episode 1, the premiere episode of this series. Let's talk about it. Spoilers galore. If you guys haven't watched it, like always, we're not holding anything back. We're not pulling any punches. We're going to talk about everything we saw in all of the 40 minutes that we sat there and viewed Falcon and Winter Soldier. What'd you think, Tim? I know just like one sentence or one word, whatever phrase, whatever we want to put it. I was a little underwhelmed. With that said, I liked it. I enjoyed the episode. Definitely thought it was good, but that's what I thought it was good. I didn't think it was amazing. I didn't think it was mind-blowing. I was just like, yeah, this is cool, but for me personally, nothing from it was like, oh, this is gonna be epic. You know what I mean? I was just like, yeah, it's good.
Right.
What about you?
Yeah, pretty much the same. I mean, the opening of the episode was dope.
Yeah.
I mean, the whole sequence with Falcon rescuing a soldier. I mean, that was straight. I mean, the quality of that whole sequence was just straight up MCU.
That whole like $3 million sequence.
Yeah, it was really good. I mean, it looked ripped straight out of an MCU major motion picture. So they didn't miss a beat there. So that whole thing was a really cool way to kick off the episode. And then after that, it just kind of went into like this. It slowed down a ton. There was another small sequence with the Winter Soldier that set up for, some broader aspects of what he's wrangling with, what Bucky is dealing with after the fact.
Right.
And throughout the episode, he's kind of going around and he's, as they say, he's making amends for his past and the damage that he had done throughout his unintentional career with Hydra. But there was some, cool aspects and story set up. And especially I thought with Winter Soldier, I thought that there was some really compelling moments with Bucky and what he was wrestling with, trying to, he's still having nightmares. He's still having flashbacks, and it's just really wreaking havoc on him emotionally. So I thought that was really cool. The stuff with Sam was interesting, but it was a lot of setup. So it was a little bit slower. As you see what he's going through with his family and so on. So, after that first sequence, it just kind of really slowed down, and it was a lot of setup, and it just kind of left you at the end of the episode. You were just kind of like, okay.
Yeah, no, I agree with you 100%. Like, just like, because we actually haven't talked about it. Yeah, this is the first time we're talking. Usually we talk about it a little bit before we get on the podcast, but this is the first time we're giving each other, any sort of thoughts on it.
Right.
So yeah, it seems like we landed pretty much on the same page with this, because again, Winter Soldier, I thought, was my favorite part of the episode, especially like you were saying, him dealing with his PTSD and stuff like that, how we got a flashback of when he was still the Winter Soldier, going in basically to this hotel, being the terrorist that he was, killing people that they were sending him after. But I like how they brought that, to current day, where he killed this young man that was unfortunately, wrong place, wrong time,
right?
All the way to you see Bucky now in present day hanging out with this old man who owns or runs a convenience store, and you're kind of asking yourself, like, why the heck is he hanging out with like this 78-year-old, right? Like having like sushi and stuff with him. And
at first, I thought maybe is this like an old buddy from his youth or something?
Right, because we find out in the episode that Bucky's actually 106 years old, if I remember correctly.
Exactly.
So we got like an actual age for him. But as the episode goes on, we learn Bucky's hanging out with him because that's the father of the guy he killed in that flashback we saw earlier in the episode. So he's kind of like trying to, give the guy, I don't know, make up for past mistakes by giving this guy friendship or, companionship for the loss of his son, because this guy it's eating at him that he didn't believe, or it's eating at him that the way his son died just didn't make sense because what the cops told him and stuff didn't line up with what he thought really happened. He just, in life, you just have that feeling where you're like, nah, that's not it. I don't care what you say. Something's more here. That's what the man has. And obviously he's right. Bucky knows this. Later in the episode, there's a real, really, really good moment where Bucky's actually on a date that the old man set him up on. Funny enough, he just leaves the date because they start talking about this man and goes to finally tell him the truth. But when he opens the door at the guy's apartment, he sees like a little shrine with a picture of his son and stuff there. He just couldn't do it. And I just thought, for me, that was just the coolest part of the episode, that whole Bucky thing, because we even see Bucky at a psychiatrist. He's going through to see a psychiatrist every week to make sure that he's, he's dealing with PTSD, right? Like they do with lots of soldiers and stuff like that. Anyone in the military who's had tragic experiences, you can't just go back into normal, society. It's not that easy. They've seen him done some stuff. It's very unfortunate. And we're seeing that with Bucky, which I think is really cool because, again, it's what I just said. It plays with like real world things that happens to our soldiers in war. So to see that kind of touched upon, obviously in a superhero way, but see that touched upon in this series is going to be really, really cool. And I'm curious to see how that's going to affect him going forward, because at this point in time, he's like no longer, in action, right? He's like, again, he's been like discharged from the Avengers, I guess. But obviously we know that's not going to happen because he's going to team up with Falcon probably in the next episode or so and be the Winter Soldier again. But as far as for the Falcon, like you said, what I enjoyed most about the Falcon, as I didn't enjoy it as much as the Winter Soldier story in this first episode, but I did like seeing his personal life. I thought that was cool, where we get introduced to his family, his sister who's struggling to keep their family business afloat, literally
his
because
background,
his background, how the parents left them, their boat company and stuff like that. They're trying to get a loan and all that stuff. So I love seeing the personal family history for superheroes. So I did like that. But for me, again, not to keep repeating myself, but I think the Bucky Barnes arc is going to be more interesting to see him deal with PTSD and all that stuff, especially since he's 106 years old, right? So he's been fighting for like ever. But another big thing though is this is a twist for me. I had no idea that the villain, or what at least the first episode is portraying to be the big bad for the series, Flag Smasher. I had no freaking idea. I thought Baron Zemo from the trailers and stuff like that, obviously he's going to make his way in future episodes and maybe he'll be the real big bad behind it all. But this pilot episode is setting up the Flag Smasher as the big bad. So I'm curious to see where that goes going forward, because in the comics, he's like one of those, like, if you read a lot of Captain America comics, stuff like that, you know who he is, but he's not going to be like no freaking Green Goblin or something. A lot of people are not going to know who the heck this guy is. And much like the series is telling us in the comics, he's basically a terrorist who's all about nationalism and stuff like that, and basically wants to change the world for the better, as all these villains say.
They all?
As all they say they want to do. So yeah, I'm very curious to see where that goes. I like the whole handprint thing on the masks and how it's building like this whole, cult uprising across the nation as they're doing. So curious to see where that goes.
Yeah, obviously this series is going to, similar to WandaVision, it's going to introduce several different characters, and we're not going to really know like what's going on probably for a little while. This seems to kind of be the route that they're taking with these series. So, we got the Flag Smasher element that was introduced, as well as the introduction of U.S. Agent there at the end of the episode.
Which that poor man, can we just pause for a second? That poor man is getting torn apart with memes on the internet because of how the helmet looks on him, let's just say. I don't want to be, I don't need to add to like all.
Right. We're not going to make fun of the guy.
Yeah, no. But again, I'll say that poor man. The internet's not being nice.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of the way of things these days. But yeah, it is what it is.
You're like just moving on.
Yeah. So, but we got introduced to U.S. Agent at the end of the episode, and we're gonna see that story unwind here over the next 6 episodes. 5 left. But we've also got, we know for a fact we're getting Baron Zemo in this episode. So we don't really know where it's all going to go, right? We don't know how all these pieces are going to fit. We don't know who the main villain is actually going to be. We don't know what the primary story arc is going to end up being. In fact, by the end of this episode, we don't even have Sam and Bucky together yet.
No.
So this was just a lot of very early on setup You know, and one of the things I found interesting was Sam's background as they got into his backstory with his family and the fishing business and the boat that they own, and their parents are both passed away, and him and his sister own it together, as well as the family house, and you know, Sam wanting to protect the family's legacy and all these kind of things. And if you've ever listened to Anthony Mackie talk about his family and his upbringing, you know, it's actually very similar to his own personal upbringing.
Oh, is that right?
Yeah, he grew up in New Orleans, and his dad was a blue collar worker, and you know, he would work on I believe he was a roofer, if I remember correctly, but he would take him and his siblings, and in the summertime from a very early age, he tells about how his dad would take them out, and he would have them working in the 100-degree, 100% humidity heat of New Orleans on roofs and stuff like that, you know, putting tar down and stuff like that. And, you know, he would ask them, he would, you know, first to teach them the value of hard work and a hard day's work and so forth. But also, you know, he would ask them afterwards, he's like, do you like being out here in this heat and doing what I'm doing? And they were like, not really, Dad. And he would say, well, then you got to go to college. You got to work hard. You got to find what you want to do, and you got to work hard to accomplish it. And so he tells that, you know, that blue collar, you know, salt of the earth background of his that kind of led to him having his personal principles and value system and his work ethic, and how, you know, he appreciates his life because of the principles and the work ethic that his father instilled in him and his siblings. So Sam's story in this series and in the MCU and in comics, it's actually very similar, which I found really interesting. But I
wonder if he had any input or say in that, or it's like
that's what I
Feige
wondered,
in the studio wanted to pull from that just to be like, you know, it'll obviously feel more organic doing that too.
Well, yeah, that was kind of my exact same curiosity. Is when I was watching it, I was like, I wonder if he played a direct role on you know, the character's background or how they're going to relay that to the audience. And I would guess yes, that would be my guess. And he's in a position where he can do that now with this character, where they can say, we want you to make it your own and make it feel like something that you can, you know, easily adopt. And a story that you feel proud to tell, that sort of a thing. They're
definitely abandoning his comic book roots for sure. So it's, at least it seems, again, we haven't got too much into it, but I'm wondering if, you know, they'll reveal that his dad was a reverend and stuff like that, and that, you know, he was killed and his mother was like, I'm very curious to see if they're just going a completely different route, or if they'll pull little bits here and there to kind of like, you know, what I would geek out about is if like his sister mentioned in a later episode, like that he used to have a bad temper, and to be like, yeah, it's when all the kids in the block used to call you Snap Wilson. That would be odd. That's all I would need to be a nice little Easter egg from that bad personality he had back in the Silver Bronze Age of comics. So yeah.
Yeah, that would be a very cool ad. You know, but that was one of the things that really made me think about it, is because you know, the similarities, I guess you would say, and that's kind of what I was mentioning, is like in the comics, is the similarities is he has like this background. It's you know, his dad is a reverend, but it's, you know, it's kind of that blue collar, you know, salt of the earth, you know, work hard, you know, good ethics, good principles, you know, in the comics, he's taught that from his dad as well, like to take care of people and to treat people well and all this kind of a thing. So you see elements of that in this storyline, but that's pretty much where it stops. There's a lot more similarities to Anthony Mackie's actual real life upbringing, which I found super interesting. But I do also agree with you. And like I, you know, started out saying, I think that the stuff with Bucky and, you know, the Winter Soldier is also going to be very, very compelling as this rolls out. I found it to be compelling what they were doing with him, even in the MCU, where he was having to try and find a way to live with the horrible things that he was forced to do, and the psychological aspects of that, and the similarities to what real life soldiers actually do deal with. As you said, the PTSD and the trauma that comes along with taking a human life and having to do that for any reason, right? Unless you're a psychopath, you know, that's a different animal. But for anybody else, even in self-defense, I mean, that is a trauma that you have to live with, knowing that even though it was, for, defense or of yourself or a loved one or whatever, an innocent person, you still were forced to take a life. And that is something that we are not wired to do organically. So despite what human history might tell us, but it has elements of Tom King's Hero in Crisis a little bit to it, as far as like the comic book, and kind of taking that element of like what heroes go through and so forth, and translating that, or at least relating that in some way to what soldiers might deal with PTSD and some of the psychological rehab that they might see and so forth. So I find that to be really compelling, and I'm going to be very interested to see how they roll that part of it out over the course of the season, and also how Bucky and Sam end up helping each other through what clearly is two people that are dealing with some very difficult things. Especially Sam having been gone for 5 years, and his family kind of feels like, we know it's not your fault, but you kind of were gone, and we were forced to deal with all this stuff on our own. So they did lay out some interesting groundwork. But at the end of the episode, we were kind of left with, I have no idea really where this is going. It's just some good, initial groundwork, and then we'll see where it goes from here.
Yeah, like you said, I'm very curious to see where it goes, and I definitely want to see, because at the beginning of this episode too, we see them play with the end of Endgame, where Steve gave Falcon his shield, and in this episode we see that Falcon, Sam Wilson, he's like, I don't want it. So much so that he donates it. He gives it to a museum so it could live in the Captain America exhibit. And War Machine makes a cameo in this episode too. Good old Rhodes being like, yo, man, what are you doing? Like, he gave you that shield. Aren't you going to take it up? And Sam's basically, no, I don't want to. That was his. Like I told him, it just like he said in the movie, it feels like someone else's. So I think that's definitely one of the first things they showed us, because by the end of the series, he's ultimately going to become, the new Captain America. You'd have to assume, right? Like at that point, I feel like that was so intentional to do that out the gate, to be like, yeah, he doesn't want it. He's actually giving it away to the museum, only by the end of the episode to be like, oh, yeah, I know you donated it to the museum, but we're just going to give it to a U.S. agent, unless they reveal that they made him a different shield too, because that's what they did in the comics. They made a second vibranium shield. So that could be it as well, but we don't know that yet. But either way, he gave the shield away, and he's kind of annoyed when his sister at the end of the episode is like, dude, Sam, you got to come watch this. And they're watching on the news that, the U.S. government's announcing their new quote unquote Captain America, which is, of course, John F. Walker, the U.S. agent. So I want to know how big of a role he's going to have too, because we got a lot of pieces in here, right? So we got the Flag Smasher, which I had no idea was going to be in this series. I don't know if I just was able to stay away from teasers or trailers, or if they hid that to the pilot episode, but I had no idea Flag Smasher was going to be in this series. We knew Baron Zemo and we knew U.S. agent. So that's a lot right there. And I'm wondering too if they're going to bring like Armin Zola back into play too, because we know in the comics he's works with freaking Baron Zemo a lot. So, and he's already appeared in the MCU. So I'm curious to see if they're going to bring him back, because again, all those kind of characters like Armin Zola, Baron Zemo, Flag Smasher, U.S. agent, those are all Captain America like villains, right? Hence them being in Falcon and the Winter Soldier, because as one would assume, by the end of the series, you got to think Falcon's going to take up the mantle of Captain America. And it makes sense, because I know from the beginning, when at the end of Endgame, when we were talking about that and Cap gave the shield to Falcon, I was like, that's awesome. Sam is obviously there's only like two real choices, which is going to be Sam or Bucky. And Sam had an awesome run as Captain America in the comics and stuff like that. But for me, Bucky was his first best friend and sidekick, right? Like, sure. Like that was the OG, and everyone knows that I'm a purist with that stuff. But even with that said, Sam has, there's, when you say Captain America, there's two people that come to mind, Falcon and Bucky. So those are the only two options. But for me, I don't know. I thought it would have been cooler just to see freaking Winter Soldier or Bucky Barnes take up that mantle, because in the comics he took it up first anyway. But I do understand for what they're doing with him, especially after watching this pilot, where it makes sense to not, because Bucky's going through some things, and you're not going to give some guy who's going through PTSD trying to just freaking get his bearings. You're not going to make him be the symbol of America. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So he's totally unstable.
Yeah. That's not going to work right now. So it makes sense for the direction, but I still would like to see that at some point. Like, I don't know what long-term goals are going to be for the MCU. Like, if they do end up making Falcon Captain America by the end of this series, how long is he going to stay like that? Like, is he just going to be Captain America forever, or is he eventually going to bring it, give it to Bucky when Bucky's all good? Because he's be like, yo, I'm Falcon. I need to go back to Falcon. Here, you're no longer dealing with your issues and PTSD. You could be the new Captain America. You knew him first anyway. And this never did feel like mine. Like you said, they could probably bring it around that way. Or what if somehow they bring Chris Evans back to be Steve Rogers? I don't know. No, I feel like it's probably unlikely, but nothing's out of the realm of possibility at this point, especially since we know Chris Evans is going to be Captain America, or at least he's back in the MCU in some way. We found out that leaked. I don't know if it's for this series. Maybe he has a cameo, like a flashback. Very curious.
Did they confirm that? Because I saw it was rumored, but I didn't see any confirmations on it.
It was one of those things where Marvel Studios didn't confirm it. No. But, like so many things, I think we say it all the time on here. It's one of those rumors that it's like, it's a rumor, but so was Oscar Isaac as freaking the Moon Knight, and now that's official.
Yeah,
it's like so many things. So it's a rumor, just like Michael Keaton was going to appear in Flashpoint. So it's like one of those rumors where it's like, it's not confirmed by the studio, but it's like there's some, it got out there from very reliable sources, we'll say.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah, I don't know. The likelihood of them bringing back Steve Rogers, Chris Evans, Steve Rogers to play Captain America for any kind of a significant period of time, is unlikely. Is almost impossible, I think. He's already said that he was done with the role, that the arc had run its course. I think that they are fully intent on passing the torch on Anthony Mackie's Falcon, which I think is very cool. And I think that that's the worthy, kind of successor for Captain America.
Yes.
In the MCU, I know in the comics they've done both. They both, Winter Soldier was first, and he was captain for, a very short period of time. And then the Falcon took up the mantle for a period of time. But ultimately in the MCU, it really is Sam that is the one that should wield the shield. He, in terms of like what Captain America represents, and the principles of the character and all of that, Sam is the obvious successor in the MCU to take up the shield. There's elements, just like you said, and we've talked about it before. There's elements that I would love to see. Or elements as far as the character's overall persona that makes me, interested to see what it would be like if Bucky did eventually become Cap. But I don't know that that's going to transpire. You
know what it is? Because I completely, like you just said, for the MCU, Sam is like the only option. It makes complete sense. And he's going to be really cool. Again, in the comics, he was really fun to see as Captain America for the time he had the shield. It makes sense. I think the reason why initially I wanted to see Bucky as Captain America is because it would be so different. Because like what you just said, like Falcon Sam Wilson is like that, wholesome American, I'm going to do what's right no matter what. I don't really have that many major problems like Steve Rogers, you know what I mean?
Sure.
Where, they have some problems. But Bucky would have given us the opposite. And that's why I think I kind of wanted to see that, right? Where I wanted to see a Captain America that was kind of struggling. Because we had freaking good old Chris Evans, Captain America, who would stand up for, he was almost perfect, you could say, right? For the most part, but Bucky wouldn't be that. So for me, I guess subconsciously, I wanted to see like the flip of that. I wanted to see a Captain America that had a kind of problems, that was conflicted, and is like, maybe I shouldn't be doing this. Like, who's a little more violent. He's in the end, he's always doing good, but he messes up a lot during the way. It's just, it would have been more of a compelling of a story, I feel like. That's just something, dream world I would like to see. But it certainly makes sense for Falcon to be the new Cap in the MCU. And it's probably going to be a heck of a lot of fun. Like, I can't wait to see what kind of, again, if they do, what kind of costume they give him, and see him throwing the shield while flying, because that whole aspect could be dope.
Yeah.
That could be really dope, right? Especially live action, to see that junk where freaking you have a Captain America that can essentially fly, doing all these crazy things. That's going to be really, really fun. So yeah, I'm excited.
Yeah, I think overall, I really like the way that they're doing it with Sam, where he doesn't feel like he feels the loss of his friend very deeply. He feels,
yeah.
I really like that element. I really like that he respects the shield, and he respects what it represents, and so he didn't feel like he could take it up and fill Steve's shoes in a way that made him feel comfortable. So he was hesitant, and he said, there won't be another Captain America, sort of a thing. And he was willing to kind of let that go, as opposed to, him just, I just love the humility of it, I guess. The humility angle that they're taking with it, where he's just like, there just will never be another Captain America. I'm the Falcon, and I'm going to fill my role. And, the shield dies with Steve. I liked that, but I also liked how they're taking it to where it's like, well, no, when you lose a hero, a vacuum is created and somebody's going to fill it. And if good people don't step up to do so, it's going to get filled by, people who just want power, right? Who want that recognition. And that's the opposite of what you want. And so I do really like that element that they're kind of addressing, like, no, good people, even though, you may not feel worthy of a particular responsibility, or, you may not feel up to the responsibility. It's important that good people who really do care about right and wrong, and care about people and doing what's right, need to step up and do the hard thing. Because if not, somebody's going to. And if good people don't do it, then you're going to get the opposite. I really like that kind of embedded implication of what's going on. And so I like what they're doing, and I'm interested to see it roll out as it goes. And because obviously we're going to see him take up the shield at some point. It's just like, is it going to be one of those, you got to pry it from my cold dead fingers sort of thing with U.S. Agent? Or if somehow U.S. Agent is going to end up realizing that it belongs to Sam and handing it over at some point, or what. But it's going to be fun to unwind, and I think that we're off to a good start. It's just, it was a little bit more slow than I anticipated.
Yeah, for sure. But to be fair, like, I was hooked on WandaVision from the jump, but like for a lot of people, I believe you too, it took like three or so episodes to get like really into it. But like you said, it's really cool, like how they're going to use U.S. Agent as that kind of wedge to force Sam into the role. It'd be like, look, you didn't take it up, and now look what's happening. Some douchebag is taking it up. Yeah. So it's like, that could be really, really cool if they keep exploring that angle that way.
And I can't wait to see what Sam's reaction is, because it kind of ends on that cliffhanger, and I'm going to be very interested to see, does he go to the government and be like, you sons of
I think that's exactly what's gonna happen. Is like, dude, they're supposed to live in a museum. What are you doing? Right. You know what I mean?
Yeah. So that'll be interesting. We got another episode coming up here, so it's I'm curious to see where it goes. We've only got 6 episodes in total, so it's gonna happen pretty quickly, relatively speaking.
It is. At least they're longer, though, because the WandaVision episodes, those were like anywhere from 25 to 35 minutes on average. So these are almost, seems like everyone's going to be just under an hour, which is really, really cool. Yeah. But Tim, you know what time it is. What do we always have to talk about?
You know what time it is.
We always got to talk about the Snyder Cut here on the podcast, because there's always news.
It is becoming,
there is always news with this thing, which is great. We went in, our last podcast was like 2.5 hours. We
2.5, yeah.
Dived in and gave we gave all of our thoughts on it. So if you guys want to go check that out, it's the podcast before this one. But with the success of this, because we loved it, most people loved it. So just, overall, this seemed to be like a hit, even with critics. It's got like a 75% on Rotten Tomato by critics and like a 97 audience score, right? Where the first film, I believe, was like a 40-something critics and like 70-something% audience.
Not good.
Not good, right? That's all you need to know. Not good. So it came to a bunch of DC fans shocked, including myself, and I'm pretty sure you, that Warner Brother Pictures CEO Ann Sarnoff was like, yeah, this is the end of Snyder's trilogy. We got Man of Steel, BVS, and the Snyder Cut of Justice League.
Mm-hmm.
That is it. And she said this wasn't like, this is not like a rumor or something that someone heard her say. This is in an interview with Variety that you could go read right now. You can look it up, type in Ann Sarnoff Variety interview, and you could read her entire quote and everything, because they had an entire discussion actually about the future of DC Comics with Warner Brothers. So it's a really good interview. I actually read the interview in its entirety last night, and there's a lot. We can make a podcast just on that interview, but I don't think we want to go down that. We'll just pick that one piece out, because there's a lot to be said about their direction in general with movies, video games.
And we will cover all of that in a future podcast,
But today we kind of, since the Snyder Cut is still only about a week or two old, and we want to talk about the fact that she's already saying there's not going to be a sequel. We're not going to see how this finishes. And as we know, and everyone who's watched this 4-hour epic, it's a cliffhanger, dude. Like, it is a cliff freaking hanger. And
which we knew going in.
Yes, but she's saying no. But before we got on the podcast, you were saying, which I didn't see today, but you were saying you were seeing articles today that at the same time is kind of like saying it still might happen, because Warner Brother Pictures said no.
Warner Brothers Studios,
Warner Brothers Studios, right? But HBO Max, which though all owned by AT&T, is a separate, entity, may be interested. So this is curious, Tim. Down the rabbit hole we continue to go with the SnyderVerse.
Yeah. And to answer that question, the answer is no. I was not surprised. In fact, in our podcast last week, I said specifically that nothing would surprise me. In fact, at this point, I expect bad decisions from Warner Brothers. I'm not surprised by anything that they do at this point. They especially after having seen the Snyder Cut, and seeing that what transpired between Zack Snyder and his cut of the film and what we actually got. I know there's a lot of new people over at Warner Brothers, and so it's not all the same people that were involved in the decision making back then. But because Warner Brothers and DC and the decision making in terms of direction has just been all over the place, and we still have not gotten any kind of a real solid direction of where they're taking this many decades old fan loved franchise and characters, and rolling that out in a very specific direction, or with anything that seems to be organized, at least that they're presenting to us. I was not anticipating, even though I believe wholeheartedly they freaking should, and it better, that's what fans are going to think anyway, is they better freaking finish this after this. But, with Warner Brothers, you just, you never know. And so I'm not surprised in the least.
It's just very, very odd to me because, we don't know the numbers. We don't know how much this has actually made HBO Max and Warner Brothers, right? Because this is the only way they're really making money off of this is signups for HBO Max. Because that's the only place you could watch this film unless you watch it illegally, pirate it somehow, right? But you can't see it in theaters. You can't, buy it on demand for $30 or whatever. Literally the only way you could see it is on HBO Max getting a monthly membership, right? Right. So right. I would love to know, I don't know if they'll release it, but I would love to know how many signups this pushed for them. Because again, there's obviously people that don't like it, but I would say definitely the far majority of people are loving this thing, or at least like it. You know what I mean? We're at least getting a positive response overall, I'll just say. So it seems
to be, yes.
Yeah, so I'm very conflicted to why they would say no. You know what I mean? Because in this interview, I have it up right here as not to misquote anyone. Like, Variety asks her, flat out saying the campaign for release the Snyder Cut has moved into a new phase. It's now restore the SnyderVerse. And then he goes on to ask, what's your reaction to this campaign? And, she goes on saying we're very happy and thankful for his many contributions to DC, before ultimately saying we're just so happy that he could bring his cut of the Justice League to life, because that wasn't in the plan until about a year ago. With that comes the completion of his trilogy. We're very happy we've done this, but we're very excited about the plans we have for all the multi-dimensional DC characters that are being developed right now. And then going out that, a lot of people are like, are we going to get Ayer's cut of the Suicide Squad? Well, they say, are we going to be getting Ayer's cut? And she just literally says in one sentence, we won't be developing David Ayer's cut. Period. End. So,
and that's that.
Yeah. So it's, I wonder, this brings, because I watched another interview with Zack Snyder. This was I believe it was a Collider interview that Zack Snyder was on the Collider channel. And he said, I don't know how true this is, but out of his own mouth, he said that the Joss Whedon cut is the canon version of the DCEU, while his Snyder cut is the Elseworlds version. He literally used those verbiage, like that verbiage. Yeah. He said that the Justice League version of the film is the DCEU canon.
The Justice League.
The Justice League is the DCEU canon, and his Snyder cut of Justice League is Elseworlds, which to me, I'm like, oh man, because that means, again, I don't know if that's just him talking and just saying stuff, or if that's literally how Warner Brothers looks at it, which he kind of hinted to, that Warner Brothers does look as the Justice League as the DCEU canon. But that means that all these films like Flashpoint, Black Adam, Shazam, Fury of the Gods, all the DCEU films we're getting in the future are going to have to line up with a theatrical cut of Justice League and not his SnyderVerse, which would make me very sad because, whether you like the Snyder cut or not, I think there's no denying which one is superior. You know what I mean? So it's just, it makes me go, I don't know. But even if it is Elseworlds, that's fine. Leave it as Elseworlds. Like, I want the SnyderVerse. Like that was when this got announced and we went into depth talking about this, I feel like every week on the podcast, which we still kind of do. I said, that's fine. Like, Elseworlds is one of my favorite aspects of DC continuity in comic books. Like, have your DCEU stuff and give us the SnyderVerse. Just give it, like, I want his canon because it's been established for so long now. It was especially in this movie, I think you would agree with me in saying this is like by far the best DC movie he's made. So I want to see it, and it's set up a lot. It fleshed out the characters great. We cared about everyone in it. The team came together nicely, and at the end, it sets up for a nice battle that's supposed to come that we want to see. And I want to see that, whether it's Elseworlds or DCEU canon. And please, AT&T and HBO Max, make it happen, because restore the SnyderVerse. Dang it, restore the SnyderVerse. Do it.
Yeah. Oh man. Oh God, this stuff. Okay. So remember that ego stuff that I was talking about last week? Yeah. So as I said quite extensively and quite long-windedly last week in our very long-winded podcast for both of us, there was clearly a lot of ego involved in what's gone on between Zack Snyder and his camp and Warner Brothers and the executives and the decision makers over there in regard to the Justice League. Why his cut never saw the light of day and it got turned into the Joss Whedon cut of the film, and the extra money that was spent to make a worse movie, just on. And now we got this instant response from the Warner Brothers brass basically saying we're moving on, we're happy with the direction, and we're not going to do this and we're not going to do that. Again, it just kind of, it has the giant waft of ego, and people not wanting to admit that they had made a wrong decision, not wanting to, basically they want to celebrate what is, and they don't want to deal with, what led to, they don't want to acknowledge, any bad decision making, that led us to this point. That stuff is just, it never lends to good things. So, again, without elaborating, and I don't want to trash anybody, I am not surprised that was said. I also don't think that's the last word on it, because if it makes a bunch of money for HBO Max, again, like I said last week, I have to believe that there are some executives over at HBO that are going to see the opportunity. And frankly, those at Warner Brothers should too. There's just a ton of opportunity there to do something very separate, to have their cake and eat it too, where they are able to do the things that they already kind of have planned, but then build out this separate SnyderVerse with original series and, even some feature films that coincide, and all of them can live on HBO Max, maybe with some limited run theatrical releases and so forth. There's just a ton of room there to build out a very broad, a DC universe with, like you said, like the Elseworlds elements, and, you can have your canon. The idea of them making Joss Whedon's cut of the Justice League canon speaks to what I was saying. There was some people that, after we released our podcast, that weren't happy with how much I was unhappy with and how much I elaborated on the frustrating elements of how did this happen in the first place? And, I'm sorry that you were unhappy with my elaboration, but this is kind of what I was talking about. This is the frustrating stuff. It's just like, how do you explain to the fan base why you would choose to go with a movie as your canon, as your foundation to springboard off of, and you're now going to continue to make movies using the exact same characters, the same actors, within the same universe that Snyder built, but you're going to do this about-face, this hard right, in terms of direction, and go in with this Justice League cut that was clearly this inferior film between the two. So if you're going to maintain the course in terms of keeping the characters, you're not going to reboot them, in other words. Right? You're not going to reboot Wonder Woman. You're not going to reboot Aquaman. You're not going to reboot The Flash, although we don't know what they're going to do with the Flashpoint, but they're keeping those characters in terms of the actors, and you're keeping them associated with the course that Zack Snyder set these characters out on. But you're going to say, no, we're abandoning that, and we're going with this inferior version of a film. That's just, to me, man, I don't get it. I'm going to be nice, and I'm going to say, I don't get it. I disagree with it, and that doesn't really matter much because I'm over here as a fan and a consumer, but I don't get it. And that was the frustration that I was alluding to, that ego and the bizarre decision making, the whatever you want to label it as. It doesn't make sense. Well, there's a ton of opportunity there, and we may still see them capitalize it. And I absolutely hope they do. I am with hashtag restore the SnyderVerse, but in the on the HBO Max side, I think that is a smart way to go, and it would allow the fans to have both ends.
Well, that's what I was about to say. They could totally have their cake and eat it too, right? Because if you want to have the theatrical cut of Justice League canon, fine, keep it canon, do you, and that'll be like the stuff that's released in theaters and the theatrical side, right? But though everything's owned by AT&T, there's subdivisions, right? You have WB Studios or Pictures, then you have HBO Max, which is their streaming platform. So basically HBO Max is like Warner Brothers or AT&T's Netflix, right? And as we know, all the Netflixes, the Amazons, the Hulus, they fund and produce their own movies. They have completely different budgets than, you know what I mean? It's its own entity. So it's like, oh, sure, why not just give it over to HBO Max and let them be straight to streaming movies for Justice League 2, 3, and just the Snyderverse in general. Like that way, you would be benefiting on all sides. You could do whatever you want to do with the movies and your DCEU proper or canon, but then you could have your Snyderverse that lives exclusively on the streaming service. You know what I mean? So that, to me, that just doesn't make any sense at all. Because it's like, you can't even say at that point, well, it's because we want to do this direction and we don't want to back down from this direction. It's like, okay, fine. Give us both. Why can't you do both? I don't understand. You're one of the largest studios in the entire world. Mm-hmm. You can't do both? Like, I don't get it. Especially, like, and at the end of the day, it's all about money, right? You know what I mean? Sure, passion, you love these characters, but any business, no matter if you're in it for, the money or not, is always about the money. A business doesn't work without making money, without profit. So, so if they're going to make money off of it, why would you not just do it? So unless it comes out that the numbers just weren't there for the Snyder cut, and it was just, the Snyder fans just being really, really loud, but that didn't transfer to the numbers they needed, then fine. But if you're making the money as well, why would you not do it?
Well, I mean, I saw another report that, the Snyder Cut beat the Falcon and the Winter Soldier's debut. So clearly it did pretty good. Apparently it didn't beat Wonder Woman.
It didn't,
which was a little bit surprising.
Oh, that is surprising. Well, Wonder Woman was like the first.
It was. There was a lot of draw.
Yeah, it was a lot of draw. It was like the first of like this kind of new platform that they've established during the pandemic. So maybe the curiosity. And it was like
the first major movie release that people had gotten in forever.
Yeah.
So, I mean, but even with that, that surprised me a little bit, but yeah, I guess just at the end of the day, and that is what gives me hope, is the fact that, if there's money to be made here, which I think clearly there is, if there's opportunity for them to expand their subscription service, AT&T, I think, will ultimately give the thumbs up and the green light to HBO to go ahead and do some things with it. But the simple fact that there's any kind of a pushback coming from Warner Brothers really is just more confirmation for me of what we talked about last week. With there's clearly just some egos involved here with people that, whatever the back and forth is between Snyder's camp and, some others over at Warner Brothers Studio, whatever that tension is, it's still clearly present, and is leading to them still wanting to distance themselves. Like, okay, we gave the fans what they wanted, so they would shut up and leave us alone now. And now we're going to continue on the course. We still want to distance ourselves from Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League, but not, or Zack Snyder's version of the DC universe, I guess, really. But while not separating ourselves from Zack Snyder's version of the Justice League. It is the most backwards, strange, methodology and course I've seen with a major franchise in a while, man.
Yeah,
a while.
I just find this also fascinating because, there's just so many aspects to this. Because apparently, too, I've been on ever since the week leading up to, and then especially after watching the Snyder Cut and liking it so much, I've just been on a vortex of watching a bunch of interviews with him and just what was going on behind the scenes? What, how did this happen and stuff? And I heard Snyder say in an interview as well that when he agreed to do it, there was supposed to be no rules, right? It was his cut.
Right.
He forfeited his salary to just do whatever. It's his cut. But then Warner Brothers apparently tried to tell him, oh, but you can't reshoot any scenes. You can't shoot any additional scenes. And he literally said, he's like, okay. And then just did it anyway. Legitimately, he said he set up in front of his driveway with the green screen and had the actors come to his house to shoot additional scenes. So the crazy thing I thought was that there's two parts to this. So one, Jon Stewart Green Lantern was supposed to be in this film. He shot it in his driveway on the green screen and everything.
Wow.
Showed it to Warner Brothers when they were doing, their viewing to make sure everything was kosher with them. They're like, yeah, we have plans for Green Lantern because they're doing the Green Lantern series on HBO Max. We need you to take this out. And he's like, no, this is the Snyder Cut. You said whatever I say goes. So they came to an agreement where he's like, okay, fine. I'll take Jon Stewart out, but I'm doing an additional scene with Martian Manhunter. And that became the end scene of Bruce Wayne and Martian Manhunter at the end of the film.
I see.
So he's like, fine. So, but what that means is, he didn't say who, but what that means is he cast the actor for Jon Stewart Green Lantern in the SnyderVerse and had him film a scene. So the footage exists and the actor has been cast, but he wouldn't say who was Jon Stewart. He said not at this point in time, but he's, Zack Snyder, it was very much in vain. If they don't give me a Justice League 2, I might just show some of that footage and say who it was going to be and show you storyboards. It was very much like, I can't show you at this or tell you at this moment in time, but we'll see. Because what is Zack Snyder if not to give us teases of DCEU projects, right?
Yeah, really.
So that'll probably come out soon.
That's being very, very kind.
Yeah. But I thought it was very interesting that out of that came obviously the nightmare scene at the very end of the film, along with Bruce Wayne talking to Martian Manhunter. But what's crazy about that end scene is he said Ben Affleck's side is 80% the same because that same exact scene was shot, but except it was Green Lantern instead of Martian Manhunter. So that dialogue Bruce was having, 80% of that is the same exact dialogue he was having with Jon Stewart Green Lantern, who was hovering above Wayne Manor. He said he said he kept the dialogue, but he had to reshoot it because Ben Affleck obviously had green light on him because Lantern. So I thought it was literally the same exact scene, just repurposed with a few line changes here and there to fit with Martian Manhunter. So I'm liking all these little like things. Like that's very, very interesting. But at the same time, it's like, you say it's the Snyder Cut, but you're gonna tell me you can't do anything? Like, what are you? And I love how he's like, no, I'm gonna do it. It's the Snyder Cut.
So crazy, man.
And he did it, and we love it.
Yeah, and what I guess again, this speaks to it's just dumb. I just don't get it. If you intend to tell everyone this isn't even canon, like we're not doing anything with this, it's not canon, it doesn't apply to anything we're doing in the future, then what freaking difference does it make if he does Green Lantern or not? What difference does it make if he gives us Jon Stewart? You can do whatever you want because you're already telling everybody that you're going in a different direction, and none of this applies or counts towards whatever you do in the future.
Because they know if us fans
who cares?
Because they know if us fans are loud enough, they're gonna have to go back, Tim. That's why.
That's my point. This is my point. That's what I'm saying is it's ego, man. It's not about what they're saying. It's just freaking ego. And man. I just don't get that aspect of it. It's just storytelling. And the whole point of doing these things, especially with franchises like this, is to give the audience, the fan base, something to cheer for, the things that they're looking for. You know what I mean? And that's kind of, again, when you're dealing with comic book characters, that's one of the beauties of being able to work with these things. Is you can do this and tell the audience, this is going to be one thing, and then we're going to do this something different over here, right? And as comic book readers, comic book fans, we're already conditioned for that. We're already well aware of how that works in comics. So transitioning that, okay, we have a different alternate universe, or we're dealing with an Elseworld story, or something, something to that degree, or a different timeline, or whatever. You can easily transition that onto the small or the big screen, and freaking comic fans you're not going to miss a beat. All you have to do is just explain to everyone, no, these are different timelines, or it's an alternate universe, or whatever. And you can do whatever you want.
Which they already did in the freaking, on the CW when they had Ezra Miller Flash appear in front of Grant Gustin Flash.
Exactly.
Like they've already introduced that this is a multiverse. There's multiple timelines, and they all can intertwine with each other via the Flash and time stream. So it's like, what do you already established your DC multiverse, saying, hey, look, Ezra Miller Flash is going to meet Grant Gustin Flash from the DCEU to the CW. So it's like, what? What do you mean? I thought all this exists just in different timelines, because you literally told us that in the Infinite Crisis crossover event on the CW. You know what I mean? So I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know.
It doesn't make a lot of sense. And look, I know that there's a lot of business decisions that go into these things, especially at the highest levels when you're dealing with big dollars. There's a lot that goes into it. It's just that from my perspective, and I think the perspective of most fans, which is what has frustrated a lot of fans for a while now, for the years dealing with the Snyder Cut, is that the decision making from the public's perspective just didn't seem to be very sound. Mm-hmm. And maybe there's a bunch of missing information that would make it all make sense, or whatever. Or maybe it's just as simple as, they just really want to move on and go in a different direction. And that's fine. I guess in the end, I just don't understand why you would choose to go in a direction that champions a film or a version of a film that is not as good. It's not, the story isn't as good. It doesn't, the foundation it lays is very hollow. Instead of just saying, okay, hey, this was the better film, and we're going to say, okay, this is canon. This over here was, kind of a, we can even just ignore it and just say, okay, this was an alternate version of the film. This was the primary film. We're going to let that, now that it's out in the public, we're going to let it live and let it breathe. And then we can take pieces of it that we want and leave other pieces, and then let that be explored by HBO Max, whatever. You know what I'm saying? They just have so much room to be able to do what they want without these kind of intentional and continued jabs back at the Snyder Cut version of the film, especially considering the characters that he brought to life in his versions of the film is what is now feeding the things that they're doing. You know what I mean? Again, with Gal Gadot playing Wonder Woman, with Jason Momoa as Aquaman, with Ezra Miller as the Flash, and so on and so on and so on.
Yeah, and it just makes sense going back to the Elseworlds thing too, because Snyder very much is not doing anything to like DC proper with these characters, right? Like we know if we do get a Justice League Part 2, that in that movie he said he was going to show us how the Joker killed Robin, and that Robin is Dick Grayson, not Jason Todd. So that's very, very different. We also know by the end of Justice League 3, Snyder told us a year or two ago that Batman dies sacrificing himself to save Lois and stuff. So at the end of his arc, he literally kills off the Dark Knight, at which point he expanded upon even further, saying at that point he would introduce Barbara Gordon Batgirl, because we already were introduced to Commissioner Gordon in Justice League. He would introduce Barbara Gordon Batgirl, and she would be watching over Gotham until a new Batman arose to take over the mantle. So this is all very Elseworld stuff, because that would never happen in the real DC. You can't kill Bruce Wayne in the DC main continuity, right? So it's like just his ideas and where he's going lends itself so well to the Elseworld stuff. You know what I mean? Even with his take on Superman, where it's a very injustice type Superman. So it's like, yes, just go along with it. It's the SnyderVerse, the Elseworld SnyderVerse. Like, it's just, it seems so easy, Tim. It's right there. Like, if people want to see it, like, again, like I even agree with the fact that it shouldn't be the DCEU proper. This is all very, very much Elseworld ideas. And I love it. And I want to see it. Give us both. Give us both. Okay, rant over.
And do we know, has Snyder come out and publicly said that he wants to continue with the SnyderVerse?
Yes, in not so many words. I don't know. I've read the interview, but he basically said, he said he thought it was more likely for them to give him a sequel to the theatrical cut of Justice League than for them to let him do his version of the film they already released. So he said with that, who knows what the future holds.
That's basically him saying there's no chance.
So, but he said with that, who knows, when someone asked him if he would do it too. He said with that, who knows, anything is possible, which alludes to the fact that if they came to him and like, do you want to do it? He would say yes. So yeah, he would do it. There's no way he wouldn't do it. He's alluded to as much, but it's just the matter of, are they going to give him $200 million to let him do it? Who knows?
Yeah. I mean, dude, I don't know. I guess at this point, again, like last week, I told you that after watching the movie, I felt it was very weird because I really enjoyed it. I thought it was good. But it left me feeling even more frustrated in certain ways than before I went in. And now after the past week, I just feel even more exhausted by the whole thing. It's just like, I don't know, maybe it's best that we all just move on, because there's a ton of opportunity there. But if this is going to lead to another freaking like 2-3 years of this kind of nonsense, dude, it's better let we just move on. DC's going to do what they're going to do. Snyder can go do what he's going to do. You know, we got the Snyder Cut. We saw it. It was good. It made up for, the movie we got in 2017, that Frankenstein monster of a film, and now let's just move on to whatever's next.
You know what they should have freaking done, which would have blown everyone's mind, because it did for The Mandalorian? At the end of this movie, should have went to black, showed a scene like at the season 2 finale of Mandalorian, showed a scene, and then, alluding to something in the future, it ends, and then it says Justice League 2 coming 2024 or something like that. Like what they did with the Book of Boba Fett at the end of season 2. If they did something like, and that's how they announced at the end of this movie that we will get, that would have wrecked the internet. And these are the things that would have just propelled them further and cement them into like the hearts of fandom even more, and be like, okay, these are the little things that like Disney and stuff does that they know. Say what you will about Disney, they know how to tease and freaking sell to their audience. Love them or hate them, they know how to freaking work it, okay? They know how to get fans excited. So it's like, if Warner Brothers would have done something like that, dude, like I would have lost my mind if that's how, at the end of that movie, they would announce, Justice League coming to HBO Max 2024, 2025. I would be like, oh my God, at least we know it's coming now. We just got to wait. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Just, Ugh.
Yeah, it would have been an incredible way to roll that out and to feed the fan base. Mm-hmm. It would have, started immediate hype and talk and stuff like that. But who knows, man? At this point, again, for Warner Brothers, it might even be a situation where they're like, why are we going to spend, $150, $200 million? You know what I'm saying? To shoot a film that you already detailed and basically gave everyone, storyboard breakdowns on. You know what I mean? Like you would have to remake so many elements of it for us to be able to roll out spoilers, and then for it to be that again, this is kind of what I'm saying. Like, it might be best for us to just move on at this point, because if this is just going to be this continued thing where Zack Snyder is just constantly talking about it and there's all this pushback and it doesn't happen, if it happens quickly, or I should say, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen relatively quickly. HBO is not going to just sit on this for another year, 2 years, and then decide to bring it back, obviously. If it happens, they're going to look at the numbers here relatively quickly, and they're going to say, okay, we're going to move forward or we're not. So we'll know relatively quickly. But if it's going to turn into this long campaign, and it's just Zack Snyder doing what Zack Snyder does, and Warner Brothers saying, no, it's not happening, and the fans, saying, oh, we need it. And it's, bro, I don't know. I don't think I can handle it.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see. We'll definitely see. But it's just, I would just really like to know one way or another. Just like, let your no's be no's and your yeses be yeses. You know what I mean? Like, obviously they like freaking Ann Sarnoff said no, but at the same time, we know that she's not top brass. Like, there's two people above her, and the big dog above her is the CEO of AT&T, and AT&T is the one who pushed for the Snyder Cut. So it seems like if her boss wants it, it's still going to happen no matter what she says. So, let's hope her boss wants it.
Yeah, I really do think that in the end, I do think, even though I'm joking and kind of saying like what I'm saying, but I do think that we're going to find out pretty quickly. Relative to what we'd spent the last over the 4-year time period it took us to get the Snyder Cut. I think we'll probably know this year, or even maybe within the next 6 to 8 months, whether or not they're going to move forward with it. I don't think they'll sit on it for long. If it's successful and the numbers are there, I think that they'll move forward with some kind of addition to the SnyderVerse on HBO Max. If it's not, then you'll see it just slowly fade away, and it'll just be, the fan base saying, restore the SnyderVerse until it's clear that that's not going to happen.
Yeah. So, this year, I feel like the freaking first quarter of this year is very, lands on we'll see. A lot. That's just
all the time.
That's just like the state of the world now, right? This world, the world's always been in flux, but ever since 2020, dude, it's like this weird freaking like just sitting there shifting like a blob, always changing and shifting.
Yeah. I'm ready for that part of this whole show to be over. I'll be honest with you.
You're like, I don't want to talk about the Snyder Cut anymore, for better or for worse.
Well, yeah, just the constant. I guess my thing is this: I am over just constant controversy. It's like our society. We just feed and live off of controversy and outrage. Mm-hmm. And it's just exhausting. It's utterly exhausting. Everybody's got to have something that they're all bent out of shape about, or it's like they can't get up the next morning. I just want that element to stop. And I know that there's just a crap ton going on in the world as well. And it's just kind of, everyone just, it makes everything that much harder when everybody's just constantly looking for some reason to be angry, because we got enough to deal with, is what I'm saying.
I feel like that makes us like fans like even more sensitive to this stuff, right? Because this stuff is supposed to be an escape, right? Because there's so much more like real world important things going on in the world, right? That's like, distracting and not great, to say the least. So it's like with this stuff, you're like, why aren't you giving us the stuff that's going to make us forget about that stuff? You
Sure.
know what I mean? Now, not saying.
Yeah, I think it's a great, in fact, that's a great point. And I think it's one of the big reasons why you've seen so many fans really kind of just exhausted by the amount of politics we've seen injected into our, our safe spaces, if you want to call it that, our escape zones. And like in comics, like there's always been politics in comics, but the just general political atmosphere that we're in is just so different than any of us have experienced in our lifetime, certainly. And it's been in it's one of the most politically charged atmospheres that we've seen in American history, or if not world history. So, seeing all of these things just constant, and then things like the Snyder Cut being turned into what feels like almost like a political environment with the back and forth between Snyder's camp and Warner Brothers, right? And the Release the Snyder Cut group, and this group that's a Release the Snyder Cut, they're in the Release the Snyder Cut tribe, and then you have these people over here that are just like saying shut up, and they're saying no, you shut up. And it's just constant, dude. You know what I mean? It just, if it's not one thing, it's another, but everything kind of just feels like that it's just amped. Everything always has to be amped up, and it, for me, it's just kind of why I think both of us, when the Release the Snyder Cut stuff was going on, why we were saying even back then, we were like, look, we want to see it, but guys, calm down. Like, this is just exhausting, right?
Yeah.
It's because it strips the fun out of things that could just be fun and just, banter back and forth, but it kind of strips the fun out of it. It just makes it exhausting. I just keep saying exhausting because it is. It's just exhausting.
But it worked, though. That is the bright side. That's the bright side.
In this particular case, it did work, right? But I think the difference here was that you had the difference maker. Because I think if it was just the audience and the fan base, I don't think it would have happened. Mm-hmm. I think it's because this was a unique case where you had the director of the film, all of the cast, crew members, right? Even former executives that were lobbying for this to happen, right? People who had some sway were saying, hey, and then you had a lot of the stuff started coming out about the negative aspects of what went on during the shooting of the Joss Whedon's version of the film, and all that started coming. So it was putting extra pressure on Warner Brothers, and they needed to kind of like distract from that, I think, a little bit.
Well, also the only reason why we didn't get Snyder's original vision, or at least him completing the film, was because of the tragedy, right? So I feel like that had to have been, this wasn't a normal circumstance, like he just, agreed to disagree and left or something like that. This was like,
at least we think, so far as we know.
Yeah. Well, he left after the unfortunate death of his daughter. So it's
right.
I would hope that the higher ups were like, okay, all right, let's let the man at least finish his vision, because the only reason he wasn't able to is because of the loss of his daughter. So,
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, we'll see what happens with JLA
or
JL2 and or 3.
Yeah. And again, I think we'll find out within a reasonable period of time. Fingers crossed.
Yes. Well, with that said, Tim, I don't think we're already talking about the Snyder Cut, so I don't have the Snyder Cut's out. I don't have anything to end with, like, guess what he just released,
And thank God. Although I am surprised. I'm surprised he isn't already posting.
I mean, I guess I kind of already said it, where like he did reveal like the whole Batgirl thing for like JL Justice League 3 and stuff like that. So maybe that's kind of a tease to the future.
And he did talk about, he also discussed about how it was supposed to be Green Lantern.
Green Lantern, yeah. So I worked it in already, I guess. So
yeah. So now we'll wait about another 3 or 4 days, and we'll start getting concept art for Justice League 2. and all that kind of a thing,
dude.
We'll start.
I'll tell you what.
Footage.
I want to see it though. I want to see it.
Oh my God.
I'm on it, Tim.
Look, man, I'm telling you.
Restore the SnyderVerse. Let's do this.
I will start a separate hashtag. Hashtag Stop the Snyder Cut Madness.
We're going to be wearing like competing shirts.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, with that, we'll see you guys next time. We talk about all things comics.